Hi, everybody. Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and we're here today to talk about what is holding you back from helping your child in changing this dynamic of dealing with intense meltdowns, outbursts on a daily basis, feeling like you're walking on eggshells, getting frustrated, feeling stuck. And when we think about what we're going to talk about today, one of the things that I really want to get clear on is, first and foremost, just kind of introducing myself a little bit. For those of you who are new to the group, and there's been it looks like 100 or so of you in the past week, I'm Megan Thompson. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Maryland, and I run the largest group practice, hi Paula, that specializes, actually, to my knowledge, the only group practice that specializes in working with highly sensitive children in the United States. And we do that because it's my mission in the world to help parents eliminate daily meltdowns, stop the frustrating cycle of dealing with meltdowns on a regular basis, and eliminate the outbursts so that you can have peace and freedom in your own home in a way that helps your child feel like they have peace and freedom in their own heart. So we do that in my private practice, and then I work with parents across the nation to support you in managing that in an efficient and effective way. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with my work, I've been dealing with helping parents deal with this problem for the last 10 years. And I also have a highly sensitive sister who consistently and continues to struggle with her intense emotions. And so I know how this plays out and when we don't take action as a parent early in life. And so when we think about what's going on for your child, this video is for you if you feel stuck in managing your child's intense emotions. And what I want to talk about first and foremost is really this myth that meltdowns have to look like a toddler splayed out on the floor, whining, complaining, losing their mind, having outrages, and just literally being completely out of control on a daily basis. I often talk about, eliminating those meltdowns because it's quick and easy to observe what's going on. And it's also true that if your highly sensitive child feels emotionally out of control on a daily basis, that's still a problem. So what does that mean? When your child has outbursts on a daily basis, that could be frequently running away from their emotions, and that could pose a safety issue, right? So if they're running away up to their room and you don't know where they're going, or they're hiding under the bed and you don't know when they're going to come out, then you might not be able to find them. If they're leaving the situation, I've worked with parents whose kiddo is literally running out into the street, leaving the house. Or if you're out in the backyard and you can't find your child, think about the panic that induces as a parent. It scares the crap out of you, right? So if your child's behavior has you feeling significantly worried and concerned on a daily basis, then that's a problem. So whether your child's having meltdowns or not, the intensity and frequency is really what we're talking about here. Because if your child is consistently struggling to experience their emotions in a way that makes them feel in control of their feelings, then they are struggling on a daily basis. And so that might mean for some of you that your child is, like I said, running away or hiding, having outbursts where they're just angry and aggressive, throwing whatever's in sight, or throwing words around. I hate you. You're the worst mommy ever. I wish you were dead. I'd be better. Life would be better off without me. And what leads to that intense behavior is what comes first. And what comes first is emotional, out of control behavior like, that's it, my way or the highway, feeling like your child cannot manage any disappointment. And so what we're going to do is talk about the difference for parents of highly sensitive kids in what is typical highly sensitive behavior and what is atypical highly sensitive behavior. What can you expect from your highly sensitive child, and how can you drive the bus in your own house? But how do you raise a child who can manage their intense emotions in a way that makes them feel safe, in a way that makes them feel like they're safe with you, and in a way that makes them feel safe in their own heart, right? Because that's what we need to do. We need to show our love as parents in a way that helps our child feel like they can love themselves. And so what we're going to talk about today is really what is missing. What's the missing link for parents who are really struggling to break out of this pattern of feeling like you don't know how how long it's going to take for your child to stop this cycle of just getting into rages or shutting down. And some of you have heard other, interviews with parents that I've worked with before. I talk about this as like the icicle child who just kind of just frozen, goes into themselves and doesn't know, and shuts down and doesn't know whether or not they can communicate to you or not. They can't share with you their words. That is still the same type of problem that we're talking about here. So I want you to understand that it's not your child's behavior. It's the intensity, the frequency, and the mismatch to their development that is the problem in terms of whether or not your child is developing healthily, even though they're highly sensitive, even if they feel big feelings, even if they process deeply. If your child is having outbursts, shutting down, or having meltdowns on a weekly, daily, multiple times daily basis, then you have a problem on your hands, and it's important for you to act now. So when we think about what's going on for parents who are looking at the particular behavior, how do I get my kid to sleep on time? How do I get my kid to stop refusing to brush their teeth? How do I get my kid to, throw another behavior in the chat you guys are watching, right? Like stop calling me names. There's all sorts of things that you are focusing on as a parent, but those behaviors are a symptom that you are reacting to. You are reacting to the underlying problem that your child is struggling with, feeling uncomfortable emotions and being healthy and capable of being healthy and managing and communicating their needs. So we're going to talk about today what's developmentally appropriate a little bit. There's been plenty of videos here and be sure to consume them all. There's a ton where we talked about what's developmentally appropriate, but really what we want to cover today is what sets you apart as a parent in terms of how I've observed over the last 10 years which parents turn this around and which parents stay stuck and end up calling me 2, 3, 4 years later saying it's gotten worse and I don't know what to do. And at that point, I may or may not be able to help them based on where they are in the country and what I do. So I want you guys to get a clear picture of, and especially for those of you who are in two-parent relationships or co-parenting, you're married or living with a partner. And if one parent is seeing that your child's going to grow out of it, then this is super important for you to watch too. But even if both of you are just trying to gain information and gather how to take action and when to take action on shifting your child's internal experience of their emotions, then you definitely want to keep watching. So one of the things that we want to talk about today is why highly sensitive kids develop mental illness. So I want to talk about the difference between mental illness and mental health. So when we think about what the difference is, obviously I'm a therapist, so I have nothing against the profession of mental health therapy. And it's also true that there's a significant number of parents who have struggled significantly working with a local therapist who views these concerns as a mental health issue, where your child is just typically experiencing or expressing negative emotion in an unhealthy way, and then diagnosing your child with, say, for example, generalized anxiety disorder or maybe social anxiety, something related to the particular behavior, or depression, which is less typical for parents of HSCs. When by the time we speak, they're usually getting they're reporting a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. And so, with that said, the difference between mental health and mental illness is mental illness includes a biological component that impacts the person's ability to change the skills that they're expected to learn that will shift them out of that environmental circumstance that is leading to the mental health issue. So let's break this down in layman's terms, right? So you experience a job loss as an adult, right? You lose your job, and as a result, you feel sad. Right? Worried, maybe concerned, and you start job hunting and it's difficult for you to find that job, and you're looking, and that sadness starts to consume you, and you start to feel depressed. What if this never fixes itself? What if I can never solve this problem? And then you stop searching as much, and you start to develop depressive symptoms. Can't get out of bed, you're sad, feeling like there's no hope. you go see a therapist, and the therapist is going to diagnose you and consider it to be a mental health issue because it was environmentally related, and it's a difficult challenge. And so they're going to treat the mental health issue, but they're not going to see you as biologically impacting your. They're not going to see biology as a big factor in how to treat what's going on because it's very obvious that it's circumstantial as to how you've developed the depression disorder. Now, for highly sensitive children, it's very important for you to observe that your child has a biological component to how they process information and how they experience their emotions and how they feel their feelings. And so for you as a parent, your concern needs not to be whether or not your child will develop a mental health issue, but whether or not your child will develop mental illness. Mental illness is chronic mental health issue that has a biological component. Now, I'm getting technical here for you because as likely some of you are highly sensitive people, it's important to get to the nitty-gritty to understand why you need to take action a lot earlier in your child's childhood than what typical society might say. So we're busting myths here because some parents will come to me and they'll talk about, I know that that if my child is sad or anxious or depressed, as a teenager, we would find a therapist and we would help them solve that problem. But what I really, really, really want to, that's a lot of reallys, drill home today for you as a parent is that as a teenager, your child will likely be considered for a mental health issue, but what they're not picking out and what a professional is not going to observe if they're not clear on the fact that your child's highly sensitive. Now, granted, hopefully what I teach has, spread to the masses in the next 10 years and therapists will know what's going on. With that said, if we're just looking at it from right now in terms of what you can do to fix this problem now, it's important to get clear that your child will be need to have been considered for a mental illness in adolescence because of the biological component. But if the therapist does not understand, or the mental health professional, or the psychiatrist, or the nurse, pediatrician, whatever, isn't understanding of the personality trait, then they're totally missing the mark in terms of what's driving the behavioral issue, which is demonstrating as a mental health concern. So why is that important for you now? Why that's important for you now is because right now you need to reduce the risk of chronic depression and chronic anxiety for your child. Because what we see when highly sensitive kids go into therapy is that they actually demonstrate behavior for the chronically depressed much more regularly than for not highly sensitive kids. So we see children under the age of 10 attempting to kill themselves. And that's no joke, guys. Like, we're not playing around here. And that is a clear indicator that there's a chronic problem because children are not born out of this world wanting to stay miserable. They are not born in life experience wanting to end their life. It's just not how I conceptualize the world. And hopefully, having children yourself, it's not how you are conceptualizing the world. And so when you believe that in your core, that your child does not want to feel miserable, when we get to that point of observing kids who, before they hit double digits, are expressing and experiencing symptoms of chronic depression and chronic anxiety, it's very, very obvious, or it needs to be very, very obvious, it needs to be very, very clear to you that those are symptoms that have been developing over time for years and years and years. And so what's the problem with not addressing this now? I mean, obviously, if you know that information, you're like, okay, Megan, what do I do about it? We'll get to that in a minute. But what I want to get clear on for you is that your child, as a highly sensitive child, biologically has a much higher risk of developing chronic depression and chronic anxiety. Okay, so it's important for you, if you were to walk into the doctor's office and the doctor says your kid has this certain gene that means you have to put sunscreen on, you have to keep them out of the sun, or they will get freckles and get major sunburn, right? What happens? You put sunscreen on religiously, and so what I want to do is help you understand that even though you can't see, just like you can't see your kid who's like, redheaded and has a much higher likelihood of developing skin cancer, you still put sunscreen on them, right? So why are we as parents thinking that our kids will be just fine if we don't address this problem now? So I really want to just observe and influence your thought process here on why not taking action now is a problem for your child. And one of the things that I see parents miss the mark is this concept of a feeling like they're committed as a parent. And that part is unquestionable. You decided to have kids, you committed to raise your child. But the commitment that I want to talk to you about as a parent now is the commitment to raise your child in a way that reduces their risk of developing chronic depression and anxiety. Because that, guys, takes a different level of commitment. End of story. And I've spoken to hundreds of parents at this point, and we serve hundreds of parents over each year across both businesses, coaching and in the practice. When we think about parents who really truly turn this around, they notice that their child has a much higher likelihood of that chronic depression and that chronic anxiety, and they choose to commit to fixing it at an early age. And part of that is because many of them are in the field, a similar field. They're either in educational field, they're teachers, or they're professors, or they're what's the word? They're therapists. I don't know why I missed that word. They work in the psychology field, or they work in the medical field, or in some way, shape, or form. And so they value early prevention. Okay, so that's this concept of acting early so that you don't deal with chronic disease later, or you don't deal with a chronic problem later. And so that is clear. Okay, that's what the level of commitment we're talking here in terms of committing to fix the problem for your highly sensitive child. You can't just be committed to parenting. I mean, you signed up to have a kid, so you kept that kid. And I'm not trying to be weird or gross or morbid, but you kept that kid in your home. So yeah, you committed to raising your kid. You're watching my videos, you committed to raising your kid. But are you committed to reducing the high risk that your child already has of developing chronic depression or anxiety? That takes a different level of commitment. And you have to be very decisive in order to fix that. You can't just keep thinking and researching and reading a bunch of books and not taking actual action. And the information consumption, there stands a point between where you stop consuming information and thinking that you're doing something about it, and you start to pretend that consuming the information is doing something about it. I read about that. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I read about that. I heard about that somewhere. But are you actually systematically changing how you parent your child in order to prevent the chronic suicidality and chronic self-harm behaviors that we see that highly sensitive people are much more likely to develop? Okay? And so this is something that is so important, and it's something that I actually just recently spoke with one of my coaching clients about. He's like, so Megan, are you going to break down the neuroscience for me? That's great, but is it going to teach me what to do? And I said, of course, because the science dictates the strategy. Okay? You have to have both. The metaphor that just popped in my head is not actually relevant, so give me a second. But when we think about what's going on for highly sensitive kids, you have to know more than the average parent about human development, about psychology, and about your child's personality. That's commitment level number one. Commitment level number two is you have to know more about science than the average parent. And so some of you, that might become easy because of the field that you work in. But for some of you, you have to be more focused on avoiding long-term danger than you need to be on avoiding current discomfort. So what does that mean? For many of you, and human behavior, we are comfortable in the expected, okay? We are uncomfortable in the unknown or what we're uncertain about. And as a parent of a highly sensitive child, you need to be more uncomfortable about the prospect of things being so uncertain you won't know what to do. I mean, think about having a depressed adolescent child, like your kid being depressed as a teenager. How uncertain is that, right? Like, just blows my mind to think about my daughter going through that as an adolescent. I do everything in my power every single day to shift that dynamic. And she falls somewhere along the lines of of being highly sensitive because she's perceptive. She is in tune to other people's emotions. She wants to learn about other people's emotions. She processes things deeply. And it's also true that she does not have meltdowns on a daily or regular basis, even at 3.5. And with that said, she's sensitive to subtlety. She notices very small details. And so when we think about the DOES and what other coaches are telling you, what other experts in the field are telling you, is that meltdowns and outbursts, frequent emotional outbursts, are a common thing that you just need to ride out as a parent of a highly sensitive child. And I'm here to tell you that that's not how this works. Aside from that commercial, that's not how any of this works. And that's super crucial for you as a parent of a highly sensitive child to understand, because it's not just what I experience in my own home. It's also over time what I've observed in parenting many parents. Coaching many parents, and working as a therapist with hundreds of clients over the last several years, over a decade at this point. And when we think about what's going on for parenting a highly sensitive child and what level of commitment it takes to turn this around, you have to be committed to change it early, and you have to be committed to take massive action to shift that dynamic in your household. And that's going to mean that you have to be committed to be uncomfortable, to make uncomfortable decisions about how you parent your child and what kind of help is what you expect you might need. So what do I mean by this? If your child is struggling with the following, okay, let's look at this list here that I've got. Meltdowns, hiding under the bed, outbursts on a frequent basis, going from 0 to 60, enough, all right, I quit, and freezing, and shutting down, or not telling you what's going on, and crying, and just being, literally melting in that way. That means that they are emotionally not staying in the room. They are emotionally escaping what's going on. Okay? So your child is here with you in the moment. You're talking to them or you're seeing them. But emotionally, they're somewhere else. Get me out of here. And what happens? Their body takes over. They are in fight or flight mode. They're freak out mode. And so for you as a parent, the level of commitment and focus you need to have in terms of being decisive to switch that in a moment has to come way before the meltdown happens, has to come way before the intense emotion happens, has to come way before the behavior that you're trying to fix happens, because you have to be decisive in a moment to systematically change this behavior, to stop that behavior. And that requires you noticing that your child's intense emotion, where's my chart here? Your child's intense emotion is like a snowball rolling down a hill, okay? And so, I swear, I keep saying I gotta put these on like chart paper and not chart paper, like laminate them, because I draw them all the time. Okay, so here's your problem. Where am I? Here we go. Okay. Here's your problem. Your intense emotion, your focus for your child's intense emotion needs to be up here so that they go down the hill slower, less intensely, and they actually shift the emotional hill so it doesn't even actually get to be this deep. The problem is you're asking, sorry guys, my orientation to the screen and my finger with a piece of paper in front of my face is a challenge. You guys are focusing on what's going on here. How do I help my kid with a meltdown? How do I help my kid calm down faster? How do I help my kid change the fact that they're yelling and screaming at me? How do I help my kid be less disrespectful? How do I help my kid not chuck things from across the room? That's all down at the bottom of the slope behavior. Your child's train has left the station, and you need to focus on changing the railroad tracks, okay? So it's not working out because you're literally at the bottom of the hill with your kid, reactive. And so the level of commitment that it takes to turn this around means you need to commit to understanding and speaking to your co-parent for both of you that you have to be preventative. Okay. And that means you need to see above the picture of what's going on for your child in the moment. Teeth brushing meltdowns have nothing to do with whether or not your child is emotionally capable of managing managing big emotions. If they're having meltdowns, regardless of what it is, they are not managing their intense emotions healthily. So getting your kid to find a fancy toothbrush is not what's going to work. Getting your kid to go to bed on time is not what's going to work. Sure, affecting sleep, in a more positive way, and getting your kid to fall asleep better makes them less cranky. I mean, that's common. But here's what we're talking about, guys. That's parenting 101. As a parent of a highly sensitive child, you need to be in parenting 405. And I'm not a professor, so excuse me my schools that I went to, universities that I went to, did not use that kind of language in terms of naming the coursework. But I hope you get what I'm saying. Okay, you're not focusing on the right thing. It's not going to be effective. When your child is struggling with a meltdown or all of those behaviors that I just named, the problem with this is that anxiety and depression becomes chronic when your child experiences and demonstrates the inability to experience emotional discomfort, process it, and move through it without choosing to stay miserable and making it worse or quitting. Those three things. So if you see your child choosing to stay miserable, making it worse by exploding, behavior issues, and again, this is not purposeful, you observe that. And sometimes it can feel like it's purposeful. Or quitting and just giving up, or literally, emotionally, and physically shutting down, then you already have the key components demonstrating in your child's biology as well as in their coping skills, problem-solving strategy, to put you on the trajectory of your child developing a mental health concern, which will then develop into a mental illness. So what do I mean by that? Mental illness has a biological component. That's bipolar disorder. That's major depressive disorder recurrent, which is chronic depression that happens over and over again. So people who have bouts of suicidal behavior or deep depression and then feel better, but then it comes back. It's a recurring phase of depression versus just one experience. Drug and alcohol use and abuse and dependence, that is a mental illness. Schizophrenia, obviously. I mean, those are the ones that you think of off the top of your head. But when we think about what another mental illness could be considered, would be an eating disorder, depending on how long and chronic it's been, and the biological component that obviously the clinician would have to determine. But in terms of what's driving your child's behavior and what leads to a mental health concern versus what leads to a mental illness, you have to observe three things going on. A biological component, you already got that. Your kid's highly sensitive. They have the personality trait to make them fit into 50% of the people who go to therapy are highly sensitive, but they only make up 20% of the population. That statistic is something you've heard me say before. It's very clear and obvious that highly sensitive people struggle in today's society because they either there's a mismatch in how they're parented, or because they live in an invalidating environment some other way, or they learn over time how to invalidate themselves. And which means they second guess themselves and they question their gut, and they can't manage their own intense emotions in healthy ways. And so they don't make safe decisions. And so that's the biological component. Socially, we just talked about it. That's the environment. That's you as a parent. You as a parent are the only factor in your child's environment that is unchangeable. And what I mean by that is you can switch a school. You can switch a teacher. You can switch a soccer coach who is kind of a jerk. You can do all of those things. But as a parent, if you're not switching yourself, right, you're not doing that, then you have to change yourself. You have to change who you are. You have to change how you perceive your child. And you have to change your level of commitment to stop this problem, to stop the dynamic. And that requires a high level of decisiveness and a higher level of commitment than the average parent. I'm sorry, but that's just what it is. So if you're comparing yourself to the average parent and your child's having daily meltdowns, then you're going to be stuck. So when that happens, guys, when we think about what what parents really need to do to turn this around, you have to observe how to get your child to experience emotional discomfort, stay in that emotional discomfort, and then move through it. So what does that mean? I have this graphic that is not mine. I'm going to share that here. Make sure I have my face out of the, where am I going here? Okay. You have to lead first. So let me see if I can make this bigger for you. It's a little with these words, and you probably are looking at me on your phone, so that's even smaller. Okay, so again, this is not my graphic. Success something. Success Lux. This is their graphic, but I love it. I love it. Love it. Because some of you have seen it or thought about the concept of a growth mindset, right? Like you see any challenge as an opportunity for growth. You see any discomfort as an opportunity to lean in, right? I mean, there's a book about it. You see challenges as opportunities to fix the problem. Some of this for you might mean that you're fixers and you go into fix-it mode with your child, and that's exacerbating the problem. But that's a different, that's something I help my clients work out and break that down. That's a pattern that you can't break down in a video. And so if that's happening, guys, then you need to lead first. You need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to get out of your comfort zone two different ways. You need to talk to your spouse about the fact that they get stuck in their comfort zone. And you need to get out of your own way and start learning. Some of you are doing that by watching these videos, but it's not going to cut it in terms of turning this around if you're stuck in daily intense emotional expression from your child. So again, we went over that several times today, what that means. I'm not going to say it again, but what I want to do is look at this. So if you look at the light gray zone, your comfort zone is where you feel safe and in control. Your child feels safe and in control when nothing changes. They're highly sensitive. That's how it works. Or they feel safe and in control when they have constant variety. They are a highly sensation-seeking, highly sensitive child. Next, when something happens and they are expressed, a circumstance happens and they are being stretched beyond what's normal for them, what's typical for them. Case in point, a child's everyday life, because life doesn't go like in a robotic way according to plan all of the time. Then you experience a lack of self-confidence. You see if you can find an excuse to get out of it, and you are affected by other people's opinions. Can other people tell me whether or not I can solve this problem, or whether or not this problem is something I need to solve, or you ask for other people to tell you that you're doing a good job. And quite frankly, if that's how you are parenting, then you are still stuck in the fear zone, even if you're consuming all the information. So what this means is that you as a parent need to move into the learning zone. You need to move out of information gathering. You need to move out of, quietly having quick conversations with your spouse. You need to move out of feeling like this will solve itself, or that your kid will grow out of it. Because again, that's where you feel safe and in control. If I tell myself this placating thought that my kid will grow out of it, then I don't have to change as a parent, because I'm doing the best I can. And especially during the time of a pandemic, I can't take on any more things. Well, guess what, guys? Your kid is growing up in a pandemic too. And I'm sorry, but you chose to have kids. I'm sorry, not sorry, right? Like we all chose to have kids, and we chose to raise them come hell or high water. I mean, push comes to shove, we would give our life for our children, right? So in the time of a pandemic, if you're noticing that your child is significantly struggling, that's a spotlight shining a light on what you need to fix and helping you understand and see that your child's been struggling for a lot longer, and now it's coming to light. And it's an opportunity, because if you're not seeing it as an opportunity, guys, I've gotten emails from people over the last couple of weeks. How dare you ask me to change how I parent? Don't I have enough to deal with already? Please unsubscribe me from your email list. I'm like, go right ahead. There's a button. You can solve that problem yourself. With that said, no judgment, right? Because it's not my job as a parent or as a parent coach or as a clinician to tell you that you need to change your life. I'm not here to convince anybody that they need to fix that problem. I'm here to show you what's not working and help you decide, and that's your decision whether or not that works or not. Okay? So if you are making what I'm sharing mean that you're wrong and then you get mad at me for it, then that's your fear talking, not mine. I know exactly what works. I help parents figure it out, and they know exactly what works, and they feel free from that intense emotion on a daily basis. So I'll keep talking. With that said, if you're stuck and you're stuck in fear, then fear will show up as anger. Fear will show up as frustration. Fear will show up as paralysis. I mean, fear will show up as anxiety. And when that happens for you, you have the opportunity to break through it, because you can't lead your kid in feeling uncomfortable in whatever it was, whether or not they wanted a cookie before dinner. That's an uncomfortable experience when you say no. But if they can't manage that discomfort, then they freak out because they can't manage their intense emotion. And so they freak out, and because they don't see that as a learning or growth opportunity. Now, it's important for you to observe that logically your 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old is not going to have a conversation with themselves in their head about, this is an opportunity for me to take a deep breath. I just got to practice all of what mommy and daddy have been talking to me about. They're going to inherently know that they have that skill, remember it, and use it if they've learned how to generalize their skills. And that is how you develop a lifelong learner. That is how you develop a child who learns from their experiences. And why so many of you feel like you're stuck in this cycle of like Monday morning quarterbacking every little thing. Because you have the conversation with your child about what they can do better differently next time, but they are so stuck in shame and intense emotion that they're not hearing you. They are in one ear, out the other. And when that happens, that's happening because they are in their fear zone. They are finding excuses. Mommy doesn't understand me. I'm different. This isn't what's working. They're shut down. So they might nod or say the right things, but they're not actually experiencing the opportunity for learning when you have those chats with your child. Number one, because play is the language of children, not talk. But number two, because you haven't helped your child inherently believe that they are capable of managing their own problems. And they can't move out of that learning zone if you're not moving out of that learning zone consistently as a parent. And so what that means is that you won't be able to live your dream of feeling like and knowing and watching your child handle challenges, take a deep breath and say, I got this, Mom. Okay, I'll have my cookie after dinner. I mean, that's a small thing, right? But for parents who deal with this intense emotion when you're walking on eggshells and you're holding your breath and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop all day long and you're, oh my God, we didn't have a meltdown all day. And then you say no to a cookie and you're like, and you feel that lurch in your gut and your shoulders creep up to your ears and your ears get hot because you're like, is this the moment that my kid is going to lose it? Did we just lose, did this perfect day just get ruined? That's the fear zone. That's what's happening up in here, guys. I'm very proud of myself for getting the orientation right. That's what's going on. You are living in fear. You are not living in learning. You are not living in growth. And you will not get out of that if you don't get out of your own way. If you don't start having conversations with your spouse about how you can turn this around. If you don't start making this a conversation at the end of the night. If you don't start making this, instead of Monday morning quarterbacking of like, what could we do differently? What steps do we need to take to change this dynamic? Who do I already know that has accessed this solution before and has won? Who no longer has to deal with daily meltdowns in the middle of a pandemic, still thriving. We see parents do it all the time. It's why I'm so consistent in posting celebrations for you to see what's possible for parents. It's not because I want to brag. It's because I want you to see that everybody else is talking to you about how this is normal, and it's not. It's not normal. And it comes from a place of love, bold love, compassion, but also certainty. Because quite frankly, guys, growing up in a home where meltdowns were a daily thing, we did not perceive my sister to be capable of managing her own emotions, and that led my parents to consistently, over time, enable her struggles. And they tried the best they could. And I use words like that, quite frankly, because I need to be blunt for you. Because if I wasn't blunt for you, then you wouldn't take it seriously. You would sugarcoat. As humans, we naturally make things less important because, again, the comfort zone. Because if we're uncomfortable, we don't like it. So it's easier for us. It's easy for us to think that, oh, well, my situation's not that bad. Well, guess what? My sister didn't necessarily have knockdown, drag out fights on a daily basis, but I do significantly remember that a lot of the time she was crying. And she was athletic. She, was friendly. She had way more friends than I did growing up. And so this isn't an all-encompassing, Eeyore child all over the place, right? And it's not what we see in any kid's childhood, unless they're growing up in a significantly traumatized state where in terms of the families that I've worked with, where their children literally have no joy. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about kids who show glimmers of positivity, glimmers of hope and happiness, but the major emotional intensity is still there, and that's still a problem. And so when we get clear on what's really going on here, you need to observe as a parent that you have a direct impact on how your child changes their own biology. Now, here's the thing, guys. When you shift the dynamic in a household and you change the environment, you can actually change your kid's DNA. I'm not making this up. Trauma treatment has been determined to be effectively change the length of chromosomes, change in positive relationship in an attachment, aka a parent-child relationship, an important attachment in the child, can change how a child expresses their own genes, which means biological components can be actually turned on and turned off, okay? So when we understand the science, then we can set up the system to win, as we were talking about earlier. The science dictates the system. And so once you understand, and even in this, bubblegum brain type stuff, we need to be flexible. Your brain is flexible. You can solve problems. You are clear and you can handle it. That's 1/10, 1/20th of what your child needs to learn. Because it's not just you repeating it over and over again, but they need to feel capable of having a growth mindset. And that's totally different than you telling them and trying to convince them that they have a flexible brain, okay? Because it's not just about the brain, it's about the body, it's about the heart, it's about their emotional experience, it's about how life happens to them, how they perceive life happening to them. Way too many factors for you to think that reading a couple of growth mindset books designed for parents of non-highly sensitive kids will get you this outcome we're talking about. So this is a long one. And it's also true that over the last decade in helping parents turn this around, there are some key factors that inhibit you from really truly knowing that your child has everything stacked in their favor to not develop a chronic mental illness. And that has to start first and foremost from you as a parent. And you've heard me say this before, but I got to say it again, especially now during the time of pandemic where everything is like doldrum and ho-hum and everything's awful. If you're hearing from somebody that your child's going to grow out of it, or that you just need to keep on doing sticker charts, or you just need to keep on using timeouts, or you just need to keep on giving them warnings and it will eventually get better over time, then you need to ask them, how much time? How much time? Because if they're saying, well, it could take years, then they are not the person that you need to be following. Because that's not the time zone that you need to be living in, especially now and during a pandemic. Like, we don't know how long this is going to last, okay? And if we put our heads in the sand and think that this is just going to fix itself, what happens? You see a bunch of people going to Target or licking toilet seats and like getting sick. Right? So why are you doing that with your kid? And when we think about what's going on for your child and the professionals who think that your kid would just grow out of it, daily meltdowns, daily outbursts, daily intense emotional expression to the point where your child is shutting down and not talking to you and not communicating with you, that is not something that your child's going to grow out of. And, again, I've seen it 700 different ways, but one of the things I think is important to observe, especially because suicides hit my family twice at this point, the inability to manage discomfort in your own emotional experience is the key thing that keeps people depressed. It's the key thing that keeps people anxious. It's the key thing that keeps people stuck in feeling like they can't solve their own problems. And it's extremely difficult to do that on your own when you yourself as a parent are already uncomfortable and you don't know what you don't know. So with that being said, I would encourage you to reach out to somebody who knows what they're doing with parenting highly sensitive kids. I'm not going to kid you in saying that there aren't other coaches out there, there aren't other experts out there, and it's also true that you need to listen to what they're saying to you. Are they telling you that your child will grow out of it? Are they telling parents of older children that their kids will grow out of it? If your kid's 6 and you hear them coach a parent of an 11-year-old that their intense emotions are something they will grow out of when you keep giving them hugs and you keep meeting them with their emotional experience, then what do you think they're going to tell you with 6-year-old 5 years from now? Their perception is not going to change. So that's super important, especially now while you guys are trying to make sense of changes in the world. Your child's trying to make sense of those changes in the world now too. And if you are not focusing on helping your child in that moment, in this moment of time, then my question to you is when? Like, when? Because if a pandemic that exacerbates your child's intense emotions isn't a wake-up call that your kid needs your help, how is going back to normal going to feel normal? Going to feel like a better time to fix this problem? I'm just puzzling myself with that question, honestly, because I don't believe that as a parent you ever put your parenting on pause. And you certainly don't if you're watching these videos. And so if that's the case, then why wait to fix it? Why keep dealing with more misery when you're already miserable? Aren't you trying to help your child choose not to stay miserable? Aren't you trying to help your child stop feeling like they should just give up by now or wait and see if somebody else will solve their own problems for them? How does that lead your child out of the same mess that you're stuck in? You have to fix your mindset and change the way you perceive the world. And you have to address that first as a parent. And you have to change your definition of commitment, which is, back to the theme of today, if you're really, really, truly going to solve this problem. And that's going to be the difference between staying stuck and getting out of it and finally feeling like you know exactly what to do again and again, no matter what the heck life throws at you, so that you know exactly how to support your child, no matter how they experience the world. Because it could be a pandemic, this month. Could be the fact that your child's bullied and you can excuse the behavior away from that. Next month, it could be that your child has a, I hate to say this, but like a bad teacher next year, and you just explain it like that. When's the right time? How is now not a better time than ever to manage your child's intense emotions in a safe and effective way so that you no longer have to deal with it? And once you get a repeatable system down pat for your child, then no matter what happens to your family as a whole, no matter what happens to you as an adult, your kids' problems are solved. Your kid has developed the capability of feeling like they could solve all problems. Isn't that the whole purpose of why you decided to raise your child in the first place? You wanted that experience of feeling capable, of knowing how to raise your child, knowing how to solve their problem, knowing how to help them solve their problems. It's what you signed up for as a parent, right? You know, I know for certain that if you're in this group and you're consistently watching the videos, it's not because you just wanted to keep a roof over your kid's head. That's not who you are as a person. It's not because you just, happen to willy-nilly decide to have a child and see how that plays out. Well, this will be a fun project for the next 25 years. I hope you're laughing along with me in terms of how absurd that is. So if that's the case, and if you're that person, then I would encourage you to reach out and get on our list to book a call, because we know for certain the parents who are ready to solve this problem, there is no better time than yesterday to be dealing with knowing exactly what to do to support your child and shifting out of this dynamic of knowing exactly what to do. But here's what you need to understand. This is not for everybody. We already talked about significantly what that level of commitment looks like. But it's also not for people who won't have conversations around how much they're stuck. And parents who are not comfortable in having that conversation, not comfortable getting clear on why you're stuck, then we're not a fit. So with that said, when we speak together on the phone, my objective is not to work with you. My objective is to figure out what your problem is. My objective is to figure out if I can help you solve it, and then decide if we want to work together. And that's a two-way street, because we have to decide that together. So if that's the case, guys, then if nothing else, if I'm not the right fit, or if we're not the right fit, because I don't know, that's why I don't have you, learn all about what I offer unless we get to the phone, then I steer you in the direction of what's going to help solve the problem. Because aside from that, why learn and consume more information about something that's just not relevant for your family? So again, tapping into my efficient nature, that's why we do the call. That's why it's important for us to get on the phone. And that's why it's clear and important to get clarity on where you're stuck, why you're stuck, what the solution is going to be for your particular family, and whether or not you and your co-parent or spouse are cut out to make that happen for your family, because not everybody is. Not everybody is able to conceptualize what it actually takes. And that's something that we have to figure out on a conversation together, human to human. All right, guys, the link, meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk. Go ahead and book your call or get on the wait list for the call. I don't know if any spots opened up recently. We'll have to see. You'll have to see, I guess. And we'll get back to you in terms of finding a spot that's readily available. Keep checking that link too. All right, guys, have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.